how do you really not underestimate your abilities and stay resilient when things are maybe not going the way you expected?
Welcome to Leaders of the West, a podcast for innovators and changemakers. I'm your host, Jessie Jarvis, the founder of the West, and I'm sitting down with agriculturalists, entrepreneurs, executives, and everyone in between with the goal of digging into the strategies, mindsets, and lessons that have been crucial to the success of ag and Western. Whether you're carrying on the next generation of your family's operation, starting something from scratch, or determined to climb up the leadership ladder, we're going to inspire you to continue to dream big, growing not just you, but the future of agriculture and Western as a whole. Let's go. It's the first 2 weeks of a brand new quarter, which can only mean one thing. Be a Maker School is open for enrollment. So what exactly is Be a Maker School? It's an online course platform specifically for Western trades. You can learn from home and at your own pace and join a community of makers and entrepreneurs who can support you as you build skills and confidence in your newfound hobby or career. Be a Maker School offers courses in equine photography, cinch making, rawhide and leather braiding, silversmithing and engraving, leatherwork and tooling, and then there's also a business course called The Business of Making, where I am one of the instructors. That course specifically details all of the business aspects behind being a maker. Different sales channels, shipping, marketing, website, branding, email correspondence, goal setting, and a number of other topics. As I mentioned earlier, Be a Maker School is only open for enrollment for the first 2 weeks of every quarter. So if you're interested now, it's definitely worth checking out. Otherwise, you have to wait another 3 months. You can grab all of the info at beamaker.school. Again, that website is beamaker.school. I can't wait to hear how you have inspired and fostered the maker that is inside of you. Well. Happy to have you guys here today. I am somebody who, this probably doesn't come as much of a shock to you guys, but I am constantly striving to be a high performer. And when it comes to performance, I think we can all agree that mindset is everything. And today's guest is somebody who knows exactly how to help people unlock their full potential when it comes to that mindset. Katie Hollingsworth, she is an ICF-certified professional coach, and she has worked with athletes, entrepreneurs, leaders across rodeo, wrestling, football, collegiate level athletes, professional athletes, anything and everyone. Katie has worked with them. With 2 decades of entrepreneurial experience in marketing, communications, advertising, public relations, and a lifetime in the Western world, Katie is somebody who really brings a rare mix of authenticity and resilience and a proven methodology to her coaching. She has served as a mental performance coach for the Oklahoma State Rodeo team and for the Western Sports Foundation, which is where I first met Katie years ago. And she is somebody who really guides clients to overcome self-doubt, to sharpen their focus, to gain a competitive edge. In this episode, we explore not only that, but how mindset is able to shape performance, the common mental hurdles that both athletes and leaders face, how to think about that from the perspective of a parent with your children, knowing that performance and mindset and positive self-talk are all things that we want to encourage in our children, and then how to transform setbacks into lasting growth. This is a fabulous episode. I honestly could have talked to Katie for a whole day. I am not even kidding. It was actually kind of painful to have to stop the clock when we did because I felt like we were just getting started. So she is somebody, mark my words, we are absolutely going to have her back in the future. She is just such a gold mine of information and knowledge on a topic that is so important for all of us. So with that, let's welcome Katie Hollingsworth to the show. Katie, there is so much that we are going to unpack today, and I'm really looking forward to all of our conversation. But to really just kick things off right out of the gate, when it comes to mental roadblocks, what is one of the most common roadblocks that you see in high performers, and how do you help get people through those challenges?
Gosh, I think one of the biggest that I notice is people connect, regardless of whether it's athletes, entrepreneurs, leaders, they're connecting their entire self-worth into success. And so that can be a really big challenge in that I work with a lot of rodeo athletes as an example, and it is a sport that is very luck dependent. We can be totally prepared, but if we get a stock draw or a ground condition or weather that's outside of our control, sometimes we are not in complete, navigation of that success. And so really helping those high achievers, regardless of the, business or whether it's in sport, to say, how do I start kind of pulling back and redefining what success means? How do I not just make success about beating my numbers from yesterday? I think that's very common, whether it's in sales, whether it's in, sport. It's like, well, I've got to constantly be beating my personal best. And it's like, okay, how do we actually come back to what kind of systems have worked? What is my process that works? How do I disconnect my entire worth as a human from this idea of success so that sustainability can be created? So I would say that's probably something that I notice most often, regardless of the high achiever that I'm working with.
Well, you're so right on the specification of you can't always go out and have your personal best. You can't always go out and set a PR. But just because you didn't set a PR doesn't mean you were unsuccessful in whatever your endeavor was that day.
Right. No, exactly. And so, really being able to, I think one of the biggest things about coaching is I'm not giving out any sort of proprietary information. It's really a process of creating awareness and helping clients determine their own personal success formula. Because I think that's a really unique thing to each individual. As a middle-aged parent, my version of success is very different than an 18-year-old athlete. And so that's not a universal thing. And I think there's a lot of great information out there from a mentor standpoint. This is what works for me. Why don't you give this a try? Which is awesome. But I think sometimes people look at that and go, oh, wait, that's the way I have to do this. That's the way I have to be successful. When in fact, there's a lot of avenues to success and there's a lot of definitions of success.
Okay, so let's kind of walk this back just a little bit because you are a mother, you're in your 40s, you're a wife, you've got a business. But I can imagine that success hasn't always been the same pedestal for you. And you've been through a lot of phases in that time. So how have you gone through your career and your journey, keeping your eye on being a very driven person? You're always looking for success, but then also coming into this calling and really like practicing what you preach.
Oh gosh, it's such a great question and it's such a nuanced answer. So the younger version of me saw success very differently than the version of me today. So for 17 years, I owned a marketing agency. I did all the corporate sponsorship for the WPRA, the IPRA, marketed for a number of in-industry kind of partners, closed a lot of sponsorship deals, did a lot of production. And so at that point, success was very driven on who are we working with? How much money are we making? How big of titles can we promote? And quite honestly, very recently, I was able to kind of do some reflecting in a way that I hadn't before. Actually, how much transitioning into coaching really kind of saved me as a person. I was a tremendous burnout. I was working from home. We employed, 5 to 7 people, kind of depending on the time of year. And I was working 18 hours a day. It was a really, really hard time in life, mentally, emotionally, all those kind of things. I mean, I feel like financially we were fine, but it was a really difficult time. And coaching really kind of allowed me to, process all that, decide what success looked like next, because it was, hey, maybe I'll just close down the business, which was incredibly hard, to say, I'm going to go do something else. Part of the change at the time was things like Canva and WordPress and a number of, really accessible applications were being created that people didn't necessarily need a mid-level agency anymore. They either went really big or they were doing their own stuff. And so it was clear to me a change had to be made. And so it was like, what's the change going to be? And I thought, I just want to go be a business coach. I want to go, and I went through the ICF level certification, which is very much like getting your master's. And I thought, I want to go help other business owners. And so when I discovered what this process was and how it looked, it became clear to me it was so incredibly applicable to athletes and specifically rodeo athletes, because we're just an underserved sport when it comes to those kind of amenities. So I love that you called it a calling, because it truly was. And my version of success changed to, how do I stay really authentic to who I am? And how do I stay really connected to my family? Because I only have one daughter who just turned 20 recently. And I realized how much of her youth I missed because I was so focused on what that business was doing. And I was like, I'll get you a nanny. We'll get a housekeeper. We'll have your needs met. But they weren't met by me. And so the definition of success definitely changed over time. coaching saved my life because I had to get through all the coping mechanisms that were happening. I'd seen an incredible workaholic in my father who came back from Vietnam, and that was his way to manage PTSD, was to throw himself into work. And so my value became connected to how much I made, who I worked with. So that was my definition. And so it definitely has evolved over time. It continues to evolve. I think that's one thing that I would encourage, especially if you have young listeners. I know my daughter struggles with this, being a junior in college. I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. The rest of your life isn't dictated by when you're 18, 20 years old. That evolution is possible, that growth is possible, and that transition of success. I wish it was more of an expectation for people to say, I can't wait to see what's next versus I don't have it all figured out. What do I do?
Preach, sister, preach. And I remember being in that same situation as far as being the 18-year-old who thinks like, what am I going to do? I'm going to graduate from college and I'm supposed to have a job and I'm supposed to be an adult and have my own house and figure this all out. And I don't even know that this is the thing that I want to do. But you have to go out and live life in order to understand what it is that you like and what you're good at and what you despise and what you are unfortunately maybe not good at that you thought you were. And the more that you live life, again, personally within your career, that's really how you find yourself and find that calling and truly become successful.
I couldn't agree more. I think college, A, is not for everyone. And B, that period of life is around self-discovery. It's not necessarily, oh my gosh, this is the thing I'm going to do for the next 50 years. It's really more, what am I interested in? What do I want to discover? How do I, start stepping away from my family of origin and figure out, the things that are important to me? That's really what it's about. And, your first couple jobs are likely not going to be the jobs you stay in forever. I mean, that's not typical. And so again, having this rigid, I'm only successful if, I get this 6-figure job right out of school, or I go work for, I hear a lot of people want to go work for major industry partners, AQHA or Wrangler or Ariat or something like that. And it's like, if I don't get that, I'm not successful. And I think an entity like of the West says, wow, in fact, there are so many ways in which you can plug into ag and Western industry jobs, be incredibly successful and not have to let go of the things that are important to you. Because I think for young women specifically, we are often asked to let go of what's personally of interest to us or something that we've pushed toward. Because it's like, okay, well, if you want to have the best of, family and work and, career and all those kind of things or competition, it becomes this or that, or we suddenly lose our identity because we're so busy serving those other things. And so I think that's something too, I would say that I've really learned over time. And I try to work heavily with my clients, especially business owners, is how do you maintain your authenticity while striving for success?
Yes. So let's talk about your clients and who you work with. Obviously, we talked a lot about the fact that you coach athletes. That also is helpful. Your husband is a college rodeo coach for Oklahoma State. So you are very aware of rodeo, Western way of life, Western sports, I would say, and just the demands of professional athletes at that level. You've been an entrepreneur and a business owner yourself, so you understand the demands of that. The same goes to being a spouse and a parent, and performance is different in all of those various elements. So what performance habits are what you would consider to be universal, no matter where somebody is in life?
So I believe what I heard there was asking about performance habits. So a few things that I feel like are really important, regardless of, again, in a leadership in the workforce or a business versus, self-leadership in the arena or in a sports endeavor. A few things are clarity, really understanding what your values and vision are. A lot of times people get disconnected, especially when it comes to goals, around what their values are. They're essentially setting goals that are other people's priorities versus their own. So I would say clarity of your values and your vision. Systems. I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of systems development. The quote comes, you can take it from a lot of different directions. The quote I'm pulling is out of James Clear, Atomic Habits. We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. And I think this is so true. I've worked with a number of college rodeo teams over the last couple of years, and every time it's like, okay, what are your goals? Well, making the college finals. Okay, but how are you going to get there? Well, it's going to be qualifying to short rounds. Well, okay, what do you need to do to qualify to that many short rounds? So a lot of times people just go, oh, it's whatever respective national finals or it's whatever major accomplishment, but we don't necessarily talk about what it means to break that back down. A very close to home example would be my daughter. She has set the goal of college finals last year, didn't make it, made a number of short rounds, but didn't quite get there. And we said, well, okay, what was the biggest thing? And she said, well, my horse didn't handle the ground very well because she came out of the futurity world. If you're not familiar with barrel futurities, the ground is perfect. The environments are perfect. And you go into rodeo and it is mayhem. And so this young mare didn't handle that well. And we said, okay, if that's your goal again this year, what are you going to do to prepare her? So she chose to rodeo. She got her WPRA permit and she rodeoed all summer. It didn't exactly go the way that she expected, but she had all clean runs and she got to run on, oh my gosh, at Steamboat, Colorado, 3 hours of rain and then ran in the after slack. She ran down an alleyway in which a concert was happening right next to the alley as the slack is happening. Really deep dirt. She really allowed this mare to figure out what it meant to handle ground. So when we talk about systems management or systems development, that's what we're referring to is what are the actual steps we need to do to be able to get there? And when that's accomplished, then how do we add to it so that goals are a living, breathing thing? So clarity and systems would be two of them. And then recovery. One of the things that I see people often do is they don't know necessarily how to recover from setbacks. And so it's how do you really not underestimate your abilities and stay resilient when things are maybe not going the way you expected? And then also self-awareness. I think so often people are really willing to kind of speak poorly to themselves. Instantly, it's like an instant, I have to fix this thing or I'm so terrible at this thing versus actually being able to conduct, again, I would say this is business or sport, a very realistic kind of evaluation of like, what are your strengths? What are your blind spots? What are areas that are maybe trigger, a certain response from you where you start taking things really personally? I know a number of athletes get really emotional. I know the younger version of me as an executive, I got kind of a feedback one time from someone I was working with. And she said, why do you have to take everything so personally? And my response at that time, keep in mind, this was probably 12, 13 years ago, was if I'm not emotional, you're not getting all of me. Well, now the more experienced, the more mature version of me goes, well, you don't get all of me anyway. Like you don't get to have that. Like you don't get to have control of my emotions. No one makes me feel anything. I am unconsciously letting that happen. And so I would say that that's one of those things is self-awareness, like really being aware of your triggers, your blind spots, and your strengths.
Oh, we could go so many directions just from that question alone. And setbacks and self-awareness are two things that I have definitely thought a lot of prior to this conversation to kind of prep myself. So let's talk about setbacks because they happen to all of us, whether it's in the arena, whether it's at work, whether it's with your family. How do you help people reset quickly and continue to move forward?
So I would say step number one is acknowledge it. Often I think there's this idea out there that says, we'll just keep pushing, which is great. However, what we do is we start creating this like emotional stunting. And so like as an athlete, so if we've got people listening who maybe have young athletes at home and they're like, oh gosh, like don't throw a fit, just get back after it. There is actually a lot of value in like acknowledging what happened. This does not feel great. If you've got to go set a 5-minute timer and kick rocks, like don't harm yourself, don't harm anyone else, whatever. But like if you actually need to let those emotions go, let them go, process them, understand this sucks. Like we're at the national finals and I missed my calf. That's really hard. That's not you have to push through it. Now, is it helpful to stay there very long? Absolutely not. Again, kind of that self-awareness. And then we want to shift back into process mode. What works? What doesn't? When I was most successful, what was I doing? So like really getting back into what's within your control. A lot of people focus on things that are way outside their control. And honestly, Jessie, there's really only, I'm going to say two things with a subcategory. It's attitude and effort with a subcategory of preparation. Everything outside of that, outside your control. If you're in business, like you can't control what your investors think. You can't control what your clients think, what your competition is doing. I had a really interesting experience with that lately. One of my biggest things I work on with my athletes is not trying to beat other people. It's really about like doing your personal best. And I had kind of this interesting thing in business kind of creep up for me. And I was like, oh gosh, do I need to do differently? Do I need to like, they're copying everything that I'm doing. What do I do? And I was like, whoa, wait, nope. Practice what you preach. Be you. Serve the clients that you serve. You let them be them. If they're copying you, that's on them. That's not on you. And so like really being able to identify what's within your control and navigate those waters. Because if we're spending a lot of time spinning out on things that we can't have any influence on, we're likely just creating emotional havoc for ourselves. And then I would say like really focusing on that. How do I extract the lesson? What's the opportunity here? And then how do I move on? Because otherwise we get in this like what if spiral versus how do I move into action? And I think that's one of the biggest things with coaching is we're really action oriented. It's like, it is not therapy. Is there a therapeutic component when we discuss things? Of course. I think that that's, kind of the nature of the process. But at the end of the day, action is really what we're about. So it's really about saying like, once the setback has happened, how do we extract the lesson and how then do we move forward?
Oh, this is absolute gold. So success is one of those things that obviously on the opposite side of setbacks now, it can create pressure in a way to continue to keep proving ourselves. What we had talked about in the beginning of, you feel like every time that you go out, you have to have that PR or you have to get an even bigger client than you did. And success is a wonderful thing. That's what we're all looking for. But there can be a little negativity attached to it that maybe we're not necessarily as aware of. So how do you coach people to manage that expectation?
So this is very unique to each individual. I wish I could say there was like this perfect thing, this pill, and it's like, oh, the pressure's off. But quite honestly, people compete and show up and lead differently under pressure. Some people see pressure as, it's this valuable thing that kind of keeps me connected to my purpose, and other people absolutely crumble underneath it. So one of the things that we move toward in coaching is what is kind of your ideal state of tension? Because when we think back to our best performances, again, whether it's in the arena or the boardroom, what were the conditions? How was I, preparing? What was I doing? Because a lot of people talk about, oh, I want to be very consistent. Well, I find that consistency happens in preparation. It doesn't happen in performance. Performance is the byproduct. And so typically that's what tends to work best. And I know that's a little bit of a nuanced answer, but pressure doesn't mean the same thing to every person. The one thing that I can tell you from an athletic standpoint, for those that are competitors that are listening, after coaching roughly 8,000 professional hours, 1% or probably less than 1% of my clientele can use the pressure of, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, what people are going to think of me to actually be successful. If that was a successful model, all successful athletes and entrepreneurs and business people would use it. It is not a successful model. It is very, very rare that added pressure actually results in anything of value.
Oh, I completely agree. Winging it is not actually that successful. So we talked about setbacks. You also mentioned that self-talk and self-awareness is a huge element of universal performance habits and somebody's successful. How do high performers deal with negative self-talk? And how do you teach people to kind of flip the script on that?
Typically, this is way more than one conversation, and it absolutely depends on how deep-rooted self-talk is or what's triggering it. So a lot of times we start talking about, in sports psychology, it's referred to an inner critic or gremlin that can be kind of this not good enough type of internal dialogue, and people really want to believe it. And so a piece of the work that we do will be like identifying the inner critic, understanding where it came from. I have an example of a woman that I worked with a few years ago. She was in her 50s, very, very successful CEO, would not take any speaking engagements, would not speak in public. And it was like, okay, I got to know more. What is going on here? Keep in mind, woman in her 50s. When she was in junior high, she was in a church program and she had to sing and her friends made fun of her. And she said, I never want to feel that way again. And so from then on, for the next 40 years, she decided that's not something that I do. And so it can be as small as that can create this inner critic. And it's fed, it's festered. And so sometimes one of the most powerful tools we can do from the vantage point of self-talk is really that awareness of like, where did this come from? Is this the truth? Jesse, that's the thing that you will hear from me very often is what is the truth? Way more than like blind positivity. And so we start looking at truthful conversation. So I'll give you an example in competition. Very often athletes and again, I'm going to speak to rodeo athletes for just a minute, or honestly, it's probably true for any, they will speak to themselves very negatively and very correctively during practice the entire week. Oh my gosh, you're so bad at this and you're terrible at that and you have to fix this. And then when it comes to competition, they'll suddenly have to give themselves this last minute pep talk. Oh my gosh, you're going to be amazing. You're going to grow up awesome. Believe in yourself. It's going to be wonderful. And I'll be dang if that doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is from a neuroscience standpoint, our brain believes what it hears the most. And so if we suddenly gave it this like secondary message at the last minute, your brain doesn't go, oh gosh, I got the message, I'm in. It's like, no, I know what you said to me. I seek comfort. I seek commonality. And so something that I encourage my clients to do is if they've had that negative self-talk week, right before competition, tell yourself the truth. I've done the work. I've practiced all week. I am ready. I deserve success. Your brain knows exactly what to do with that. So that's something that from a self-talk standpoint, I will strongly encourage clients, tell yourself the truth. It's not about self-deprecating and it's not about these last minute like hype sessions. It's about the truth. And so once we start doing that, we really start dialoguing with ourselves differently. And then we can also start identifying, again, awareness is a huge part of this. We can start identifying actually when that inner critic is presenting itself, and it's not actually our true voice. It's this secondary voice that's been created out of misguided protection, essentially, just like my client with the church choir experience. That was misguided protection. Your brain doesn't want you to feel that way again. And so it creates this rhetoric of stay small, stay safe, don't push your comfort zone. And so you listen to it until you know that it's not helpful anymore.
Wow. My mind is kind of blown because again, I think that how many of us are so guilty of I need to work on this. You're not very good at this. You need to get better at this. And then before you get in the arena, before you go on stage, whatever it is, you're such a badass and you're going to do this and you're the coolest in the room or, whatever it is that you're telling yourself. No, you can't trick your brain into believing that one time when the 10 other times that week you said the complete opposite. Like your brain is smarter than that. Give yourself some credit.
No, and I think from a scientific perspective, and Jesse, honestly, I really try to bring that into, that's not necessarily the heart of how I'm trained, but I bring it in because one of my things that, okay, I want to understand as an example, when I get really nervous, why do I get butterflies in my stomach? Why does my heart rate go crazy? Because if I understand why, then I know what to do with it versus it's just this like woo-woo thing that happens in my body and it's completely outside of my control. When in fact, we start understanding, and I'm a big geek when it comes to like the physiology of nervous versus excitement and like the hormone secretion that comes with it and how just the internal self-talk can change that. Because quite honestly, in that example of nervous versus excited, the physiology is the same until we say I'm nervous or I'm scared or I'm afraid. And then suddenly we get a very hard hit of cortisol and our body goes into fight or flight. And so things like digestion shut down, butterflies in our stomach, sick to our stomach, our heart rate goes really high, our respiration becomes very shallow. And so for those people who've had either a speaking event, competition experience where you're having these blackout moments, like you're moving through it, but you don't know what happens, that's essentially your brain going, you're going to survive this, but you don't need to remember it. So there's a lot of physiology and a lot of science behind why our bodies do these things. So I love to help inform my clients as to why that's happening, because when you know the why, then we can start managing from an informed place.
Okay. One thing I want to talk about before we leave this conversation is kind of shifting over to being parents, knowing that we want to raise very confident, successful, resilient children. What lessons from coaching athletes, business owners, adults apply to doing that at home for our children? Because I can tell you, I'm a mean mom. And when my kids are not doing what they should be doing, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to yell at them about it. And I want to encourage them to think smart. But me telling them, you're an idiot, why would you do this, is not making them any smarter. And I'm just using that as an example, guys. I don't go around telling my kids they're idiots. But I think that we're unconsciously aware of how those little things that we say to our children when we are trying to correct them or maybe get them to do something different, it's actually backfiring on us, not only then, but in the long term.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I wish I could be like, oh, well, I've done it perfectly my daughter's whole life. No, in fact, I wish that I would have known better sooner. So psychology shows us that our parents' critical voice becomes our child's inner critic. And so when we are saying things to our kids from the realm of not good enough, you can see quickly how that inner critic gets created. So a thing that I will never forget, of all the ridiculous things I've said to my kid over the time, and I don't, it came in, came out. Because the hard part is we typically, not always, but we typically parent the way we were parented. And we often try to motivate the way we are motivated or the way someone else taught us to be motivated, which isn't always effective. We've got to understand how our kids receive that information. I have a client right now that her mom is a former hockey player and she motivates very aggressively, and the daughter does not receive it at all. It just breaks her heart. And so sometimes as parents, like that self-awareness has to be there regardless of whether we feel like we've got to make them tough. And I think that is another hard statement I will hear is people will be like, well, they just got to toughen up or they got to figure out how to focus. Those are learned skills. And if we don't teach them by more than just saying it, like actually show them. So I would say that's a skill that's important is resilience. Let your kids struggle. Let them figure out how to do hard things. Let them come out the other side. Now, we don't let them struggle to the point of like, they can't come back from it, right? Like it's incredibly difficult for them to find success. But we let them figure out how to do hard things so they can feel that success. They can feel that pride in themselves. So I would say the sense of struggle is important. Like let your kids learn hard lessons, even though we want to be really corrective. Like, nope, this is the right way. Nope, let me fix it for you. Nope, let me do it for you. Let's just move on because we're in such a hurry. Sometimes them figuring out those things on their own is a really vital lesson. And then I'm going to come back to being mindful of what we say. So one thing that I recall saying to my daughter when she was 8 years old, do you know how much time, money, and effort we put into this? All I need you to just show up. Well, in that moment, I put the weight of the world on those little bitty shoulders. And for the next 12 years, we've tried to unravel that. Because what that meant was our family's financial success or failure is on your shoulders. And that is not the truth. So being mindful of how we communicate. Are we actually saying things to our kids that are for the best of their development? Are we letting them make their own difficult decisions? Because Jesse, one of the things that I spend a lot of time on athletes and entrepreneurs at all levels and at all ages and all maturities is self-trust. And one of the best ways to build self-trust is to make decisions. If we're never trusting ourselves with small decisions, and I don't care, like it feels like a ridiculous question in the moment. I will ask people, if I was in your town and we were going to go have lunch today, how quickly could you make that decision? And it's such a direct correlation to they're not performing in the arena because they never can trust themselves. If you can't trust yourself to decide where you're going to go to lunch, how are you going to trust yourself at 30 miles an hour? Or you can't trust yourself, to make a basic decision. How are you going to trust yourself with a real estate investment? And so self-trust is huge. So from a parenting aspect, if I could go back in time, knowing what I know now, I would let my daughter, I would not make those decisions for her. I would not speak for her. I would let those uncomfortable moments happen when it's like people are talking to this little human and I decide I'm just going to jump in and answer for her because it's uncomfortable for everyone. No, like she's finding her voice. She's knowing that she can step up and do that because when I do it for her or I don't let her struggle, I have taken away that power of self-belief and self-efficacy.
Oh, that's a lot to think about, isn't it? I feel like everybody who's listening who is a parent is now wondering, am I maybe doing it wrong? Because I know I am.
No, you're doing the best that you can with the information that you have. And when you have more, then you do better. That's it. That's the nature of parenting. No, you're not doing it wrong. You're doing the best that you can.
See, and that's where that negative self-talk comes in. So here we are, right? It's a full circle. This is why we all need a Katie Hollingsworth in our life. On that topic though, Katie, how do or can people work with you if that is something that they're interested in doing?
Thank you for asking. So I do provide a couple different avenues. So one-on-one coaching is probably the most common. So I would say athletes and individual entrepreneurs. So if you're a solopreneur, those kind of things, one-on-one is definitely the way to go. I do work with a number of teams. Usually I'm working with companies, like when we're talking about a company level relationship, usually between 10 and 40 million gross income is kind of the size of company that I work with. And we're talking about leadership training. We're talking about sales training. We're talking about authentic leadership. So from that standpoint, I have a number of companies that I will do virtual trainings with. I'm located in Oklahoma, but I work with I've got clients in every time zone. So I do a fair bit of keynote speaking. So as an example, coming in and talking about topics related to making pivots and related to career change, keeping your authenticity around pivots and career change. That I was recently asked to speak for the National Snaffle Bit Association on mental health in the horse industry. This is a topic I'm really rediscovering a passion for. And so that's going to be a piece of it. I do a lot of mindset and mental performance type of speaking, whether it's at colleges or universities with athletic teams, rodeo teams, and then also kind of in professional horseman organizations. And then I also have groups. I'll periodically have a couple groups throughout the year that are going to be related to currently competitive mindset mastery. So 6-week series that's essentially distilled down from 7 years of coaching. Here's the big topics people want to discuss. Some things that you will see from me in the future. I'm going to have some downloadable courses because I understand from an investment standpoint, this isn't accessible to everyone to be able to do. And so I want to be able to provide some basics of mental performance related to, rodeo athletes, those kind of things that'll be downloadable on my website, kravecoaching.com. And then I'm also going to be launching as of the first of the year. This thing has been sitting on my heart for 10 years. It's going to be a project called Too Busy Making Cupcakes. So I did a brief stint with my local chamber of commerce, doing some business development stuff when I was like transitioning in burnout and thought working for somebody else made sense. And what I discovered was there's so many people that are great at, as an example, making cupcakes. You should start a business, but you have no knowledge of what it means to actually run a business. And so this idea is around business coaching, business basics, having others, whether you're starting a business or whether you're in kind of that leveling up or next phase mode. This is that kind of group coaching and then individual coaching experience that's really going to be able to provide entrepreneurs a collective kind of, oh, these are things I need to be thinking about. Because I think often people get into business and don't know how to hire. They don't know how to fire. They don't know how to market. I was listening to a great podcast the other day. She was describing the process of product creation versus marketing. And she said, most of us spend 80% of the time building the product and 20% marketing it. And really talking about turning that on its head and making the 20% building and the 80% marketing and more about depth versus width. And so I thought those are the kind of lessons. And I want to be able to bring real life stories from people who struggled in the trenches to say, I've been there, I've done it. Here's how I've gotten out the other side. Here's what I want to do. So I think there's other people in this space doing something very, very similar. But I think from the capacity of a business coach with the heart of, I'm a mom. I'm not one of these influencers on social media. I've struggled through the trenches. What does that look like? How do you come through the other side? And how do you realize that not always having the answer is okay? So Too Busy Making Cupcakes is going to be launched 2026, as well as these online courses for mental performance.
Oh, you guys, there is something for everybody. And I am so excited that you did share all of that with us. I know that our audience is going to come from a lot of different places and, their ability and availability. And so to have that many options to continue to work with you, that gets me jacked in a number of ways. Okay, let's go to the rapid fire round. We can't let you go without answering these questions. First things first.
Okay.
What do you hope people remember most about you?
I don't mean to be cliche, but I think authenticity, right? I'm just somebody who's willing to be me, even if it's not comfortable for others or if it's not popular. Being me, I think is one thing that I would love for people to take away.
What is a non-negotiable in your life?
The gym? Is that a weird thing to say?
No, I love that.
I actually talk to a lot of people about their non-negotiables, and I always use that as an example. I'm like, that is mine. It's a non-negotiable for me. It's the gym. Yeah.
If you were a professional athlete, now that we know you spend so much time in the gym, what would your walk-up song be?
Oh, you know what? As an homage to my best friend who passed 3 years ago, it would be Eye of the Tiger. That was hers. When she would get ready to run barrels, she would sit in the truck and she would jam out to that. And so that would have to be it, just so that Susie was always a part of everything I did.
What is the smartest thing someone's ever told you?
Plan for the worst, expect the best, and take whatever comes your way.
Oh, that's a good one. I love that. Last thing is your favorite things. Do you have a favorite book, podcast, a life hack, something that has changed your life and you just want more people to know about it?
Oh gosh. So favorite books from let's keep it in the business realm or what I do for just a minute. If people are listening and going, what's your favorite book around mental performance? Mind Gym or With Winning in Mind were my absolute two favorites. From a business perspective, oh gosh, and maybe not quite business, but I would say You're a Badass by Jen Sincero is absolutely applicable to anyone and everyone. I think that anything written by Patrick Lencioni from a business standpoint is absolutely worth reading. So that would be favorite books. Hug your dogs as much as you can. Dogs bring down your cortisol. They bring down I have 5 of them that are always around me. So if you have squishy bulldogs, they're the best. Eat spicy food for endorphins periodically. I'm a huge fan of green chili. I'm a Coloradoan and spent a lot of time in New Mexico. So spicy food periodically, put a little green chili on it. That'll fix anything. Gosh, get in the sunshine. Like, of all the life hacks, like if the day is going bad, if the day is going good, like get in the sunshine. It's just one of those things that it's going to uplift. It's going to keep you lifted high if that's, where you're at. And buy yourself flowers. Like, I have some sitting here on my desk. I don't wait for others to buy them for me. I buy myself flowers. They make me happy. And I think that's the thing is like, do things that make you happy. Be in the sun, buy nice flowers, pet the dogs, like do things that you genuinely enjoy, not what other people think that you should.
That all goes back to authenticity and truly being and living and embracing you as you. Katie, this has been such a great conversation, and I am so thankful that you took the time to sit down with us because I know how busy you are. So if people want to follow along with you online, though, where can they go find you?
Facebook and Instagram, Krave Coaching. I'm venturing into TikTok a little bit more. Maybe give me like a few weeks to figure that out because I'm older than the internet. So I'm working on that. But Krave Coaching on both Instagram and Facebook. Again, cravecoaching.com. Take a look at, what's going to be kind of coming out there. Trying to just provide content that's meaningful to people, applicable to people, trying not to sell people a whole lot. I'm incredibly blessed that my roster is super full. As a matter of fact, I'm on a waiting list right now. It's not about selling. It's really about trying to deliver meaningful content to, things that are going to be important in their life, regardless of whether it's sports or business.
Oh, you are truly superwoman. And I am so thankful for you. And I know our audiences as well. So thank you guys for being here today. Make sure you go follow Katie. You know that you're only going to continue to get incredible advice from her. You can find us back here next week. There is going to be a brand new episode of Leaders of the West. So until then, we will see you. Have a great rest of your day.
If you loved this episode, do us a favor and share it with someone else who might find just as much value in it as you did. We're on a mission to continue to grow and strengthen the future of agriculture and Western industries, and you spreading the word helps us make more of a positive impact. It also makes a big difference when you take a minute to go rate and review the show. We can't thank you enough for listening, for sharing, and for loving Ag and Western as much as we do. We'll see you back here for our next episode.